Lights, camera, action.
Hey everyone.
Hey guys.
Welcome back to the podcast. We are super excited today because we are covering a movie we had never seen before.
Yes.
But also, we're going to have a guest as well.
Yes, we're very excited about it. Thank you guys for listening to Die Hard, as well as Home Alone, part of our 4 weeks of Christmas. Today we're doing another Christmas movie. We're really stoked to have a guest in the studio, which they're going to be a little bit later. But for now, I think we're going to dive right in with some fun facts and production details.
Yes, but I think first we should tell them what movie we're covering.
Oh, yes, that might be a good idea.
We are covering It's a Wonderful Life. And now I will dive into fun facts.
Yes, It's a Wonderful Life.
So It's a Wonderful Life was released on January 7th, 1947. It was directed by Frank Capra. It is starring James Stewart, Donna Reed, Lionel Barrymore, Thomas Mitchell, Henry Travers, and Gloria Graham. It was distributed by RKO Pictures. It had a runtime of 2 hours and 10 minutes. It's rated PG. It had a budget of $3.7 million, and unfortunately, their box office total was a little short of that, $3.3 million.
Wow.
So they did go into some debt there.
Yeah. Not totally unsurprising, though, honestly. When you look back at movies that, quote unquote, have stood the test of time, a lot of the time they're not massive successes right away. Mm-hmm. They kind of grow as time goes on. So it's interesting to hear that. But at the same rate, obviously this was released in, did you say 48?
47.
47. Okay, so this was released in 47. It's 2023 now. Not quite 100 years, right in that 80 ballpark. But still, I mean, at this point in time, it's revered as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Christmas movie of all time by most people's standards. So I think that they're doing A-okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to dive into some fun facts. My first one is that at first James Stewart, which is the guy who played George Bailey, he didn't know that he really wanted to be in a movie so soon after World War II because he fought in World War II.
Oh, wow.
He was actually the first major American movie star to enlist in the United States Army and fight in World War II.
Really?
So Lionel Barrymore, who plays Mr. Potter, was the one to convince him to do the movie.
Interesting.
My next one is that the movie was actually shot in the summertime. And if you look closely, because of that, you can see some of the actors sweating, even in like the snowy scenes.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Next is that before It's a Wonderful Life, most movies for snow, they used cornflakes that were painted white.
Yes. And key detail, they were not toasted.
Really?
Yes, at least that's what I read. They were still very loud, though.
Yes, so that's what I was about to say, that the director thought that it was too noisy, so he had the special effects team kind of do some little experimenting, I guess, and they use something called foamite, which is like, I think kind of like what's in fire extinguishers. I could be wrong.
I don't remember exactly. I did read about it while doing research, but it's like a chemical snow, but it's like kind of soap based.
Yeah, and then they mixed it with sugar and water, and that was how they got their snow. But they used 6,000 gallons of it in the movie.
That's a lot. I was actually, when we watched the film, when we watched it, I was like, oh, that's obviously fake snow. Mm-hmm. And kind of, it was running through my mind as like, this is a really old movie. I wouldn't be surprised to find out if they used like asbestos.
Yep. That's what
And
they use in The Wizard of Oz.
yeah, that was immediately what ran through my head, and just thinking about like, man, these poor actors, like they probably got cancer from this and all that stuff. If that were true, which obviously it was not, which is good.
Okay, next. When they were, so George and, why can't I think of her name? Mary, were throwing rocks at the house, like at the beginning.
Yes.
There was a stuntman off screen who was supposed to, throw the rocks at the same time that the actors did, just so that way they could actually aim and throw them through the
Okay.
window and break the windows.
Yeah.
But Donna Reed, who plays Mary, actually, when she threw it, she hit and broke a window on her first try. So the stuntman
nice.
was not needed.
Very cool.
Next, the boy in the like dancing scene that pushes the button or uses the key or whatever to open up the gym floor and the swimming pool is revealed,
Yes.
that boy is the actor who played Alfalfa in The Little Rascals.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
And then
The very first original Little
Yes.
Rascals,
Yes,
because there
yes.
has been multiple.
right. Next, so Beulah Bondi, she plays George's mother, has actually played James Stewart's mother in 5 different movies, including this one.
Really?
Yeah. I
That's
thought that was kind of
interesting.
crazy. They were none that I had heard of before, but.
Yeah.
And then the last fact that I have is that if you use an inflation calculator, the $8,000 that Uncle Billy lost, do you have a guess of how much it would be equivalent to today?
It's going to be outstanding. I know that to be true because I have a detail about some inflation from that time. I'd have to think it's roughly 10.5 times more in today's money. So I don't know. What would it be?
You don't have any guesses?
I mean, 10.5 times 8,000 roughly equates to $85,000, but I feel like it's more than that. So maybe I'm wrong on what I'm thinking. What is it?
It is $136,742.67.
So it is more like 15 times.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's quite a bit of money.
yes. So it just kind of, I already knew that, it was a lot back in those days, but I didn't know how a lot it was.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, that is all of the fun facts that I have.
Okay. Well, production details are pretty minimal for what I have. Actually, the majority of research that I found was relative to when Frank Capra, that's the director's name, correct?
Yes.
When he acquired the rights to do the film, it unfortunately became a very tangled mess between the original writer of the script, who he purchased the rights from, or I guess author, writer, whatever. And it got really complicated really fast and ended really, really bitterly with the family not really liking Frank Capra at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information about that, and I left all of that out. If that's of interest to you, you can find any of that probably on Wikipedia or something. But yeah, that was the majority of stuff that I found relative to production because it did affect production, and just like the movie was named something differently and the story was supposed to go this way and all that stuff. But I don't feel like it's applicable here. Mm-hmm. So what I do have is that filming started on April 15th, 1946, and it wrapped on July 27th, 1946, which puts them exactly on deadline for their 90-day principal photography schedule. So they were not over by one day or under. They were exactly right on track.
Nice.
Yep, which is extremely uncommon. For shooting, the film was shot at RKO Radio Production Studios in Culver City, California, on their 87-acre lot. Of the sets that were created for the film, Only 2 have survived to modern day because they were at real locations. The first one being the pool in the opening sequence where they open the floor. That is still in function today and in use regularly at Beverly Hills High School.
That's so crazy to me. I had never seen anything like that before.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, it's completely like wild. I don't know if like it's still like that where it has a retractable floor, but the pool is in function and used to this day. The other is the Martini home. That is an actual home in LA County, towards the mountains.
Still standing?
Yep.
Wow.
I don't know if it's still used as a home or if it's like a historical spot now or something like that, but I didn't look that deep. And then a couple details I have about some scenes when they were filmed. During the scene where Mr. Gower slaps young George for not delivering the medicine because it was actually poison, he didn't realize because he was distraught that his son died, that he put the wrong medicine. H.B. Gower, who's the actor who plays, H.B. Warner, he's the actor who plays Mr. Gower, slapped Robert James Anderson, the actor who plays young George, for real. And he actually made his ear bleed.
Wow. Yeah,
that was not supposed to be in the movie where, like, you know, George has a bloody ear. And H.B. Warner felt horrible.
I'm sure.
That's why in the scene you can see him embrace him so tightly, I guess, is that he felt terrible.
Yeah.
I did not find if it caused any actual hearing damage for the actor, but he did make his ear bleed for real.
That is so crazy.
Yep, it is. And then additionally, in the scene where Uncle Billy is clearly intoxicated after Harry and Ruth's welcome home / newlywed party, and he's walking home, he yells out, I'm okay, implying that he crashed into some trash cans. However, what actually happened was that on set, a technician had knocked over some equipment, and the actor who played Uncle Billy ad-libbed that line on the spot. And the director liked it so much that he gave the technician $10 thanking him for the addition to the movie. And that $10 in today's money is worth $158.
Oh, man. I just looked it up as you were saying that because
Yeah.
I was curious how much it was worth.
Yeah, which is insane.
Yeah.
And that's all I have for production details.
Okay. So I have been big time struggling with this. So I want to hear what you are going to rate this movie.
That's a tough one for me. It's a really tough one for me because I really like this movie. As you said in the intro, we had never seen this movie prior to covering it for the podcast. So, you know, I don't know if I would say like a big fan of classic movies, but taking the time to watch like an old film is something that I enjoy just because so much of the things that we've become accustomed to in modern filmmaking is so like vastly different in old films. Some good, some bad. I would say mostly good though. I think the pacing is definitely slowed down and there's a bigger focus on story, which I appreciate. It, you know, you resonate with characters on a deeper level.
Right.
Some things, you know, hit home a little bit harder. But so I guess anyways, it was an interesting experience just to have watched it for the first time. But then additionally, there were a lot of things I wasn't anticipating when I watched the film. Honestly, I wouldn't say that the movie necessarily feels long. Because I feel like when you say a movie feels long, it kind of feels like you're saying that it's drawn out and that, you know, it dragged and it's almost like a task to watch it. I did not feel that way.
It did, like, I mean, not in the way that you're explaining, but I do feel like it felt long. Like I just, I remember, I can't even remember why, but we like just checked how much longer it was.
Right.
And it was like, oh my gosh, like there's still an hour left of this.
Yeah,
And
well, that's what I was going to say is just that almost the first full hour of the film is pretty much setting up backstory.
yeah.
And it's a lot of just really unexpected things for me going into it blindly. I mean, I think you can say the same, but I pretty well knew the general story of the film. Just that George Bailey gets to a point where he wished he wasn't born, and then it plays out. This is what it looked like, and then it's like, oh, okay, my life actually does matter.
I didn't even know that
really
extent of it.
Okay.
Yeah. I knew about like an angel getting his wings by doing something good, and that was all I knew.
So I did have a general understanding of that, but nothing much more beyond that. And in that regard, like I guess again on that note, the first hour of the film was very unexpected, which I don't necessarily think is going to impact my score, but it was just, I guess, kind of unpacking my thought process here. There was a lot more things that I didn't anticipate being in the film.
Yeah.
Which I feel like makes it harder for me to score.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, how I felt after watching the movie was that this is a great movie. Mm-hmm. I loved the story. I loved the impact. It made me not cry, but just like, I guess, somewhat emotional. I don't know if that's the right word, but just
Get in
like
your feelings. Some.
like it moved me.
Yeah.
I think that's the right word I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. But just that, it was impactful in that regard. I don't know. It's a hard one to score because I could almost see myself saying like, oh yeah, this is like one of my favorite, if not my favorite Christmas movies of all time. But at the same time, like, I don't know that for me, it struck the chord of, I want to make this a tradition and watch this every year. Mm-hmm. I really don't know. So for that reason, I'm going to just say I'm giving this a 91.
Okay.
And I'm giving it a 91 because I kind of want to give it a round 90. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it was really solid, and I want to give it a 92. But because I'm in between, I'm just going to split the difference and give it a weird score of 91.
Okay. I was kind of going to say the same thing. I grew. I went into it blind, basically.
Right.
Because I didn't know what all it was about. And the first half, well, maybe not half, the first 40 minutes or so, I was like, what is going on? There were a few instances like that.
Yeah, I felt the same way.
Not because it was hard to follow or confusing or anything, but it was just different, I guess.
It's like, okay, what's the point here? This isn't a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyways.
So yeah, but like you said, by the end, I was like, oh wow, that was powerful, and I enjoyed seeing everything come together, and it was thought provoking, oh, what, who all have I impacted in that way, what
Right.
what would be different if I wasn't here, and just things like that, and I think it really also helps you to kind of not take for granted the things that you have and the things that you've done. And so all that to say, I think I'm going to go with an 88.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, I'm surprised. I expected it to be a little bit higher.
I'm sorry. I talked it up and then I didn't do a super high score.
No, that's
it's
okay.
just I don't know. I did enjoy it, so I'm not going to give it a 60 or a 70.
Right.
But I don't feel the same as you, where it's this might be one of my new favorite Christmas movies.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think that's maybe what sums up my feelings. I'd say the second half of the movie for sure is like, wow, this is, really impactful, very moving, everything that you said. But the first half is just story.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But I guess I want to touch on something here in light of having watched Die Hard last week, or covering Die Hard on the podcast last week, and the idea of like, is this a Christmas movie or is it not?
Did you have those thoughts too?
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this.
I did too. I was actually going to ask you, do you think this is a Christmas movie?
And I'm sure there are some people listening right now that are like,
are you kidding
Are you
me?
kidding? What are you talking about? Of course, this is a classic. But when you really break down, like, okay, so look, I really enjoyed some of the text messages or DMs that we got regarding Die Hard and if it, is it a Christmas movie or is it not? We had some people saying yes and no, and I talked to people at work and just stuff like that. Like, it was a lot of fun because it very much, like, there is a real conversation there. So to those of you who texted us or sent us a DM or commented or anything like that, like, thank you. It was very enjoyable. But on that note, like, what sticks in my mind, someone had said, oh, Die Hard is like, it just so happens to happen on the Christmas holiday. That doesn't make it a Christmas movie. Okay, well, I would counter the same argument here.
I know
that this just so happens to happen on Christmas. But outside of the fact of that, the rest of the movie really has nothing to do with the quote unquote Christmas.
Right.
And you can make the argument of, well, yeah, but this is a movie about hope. And that's really the heart of Christmas is, the hope that we have in Jesus, who's been born in human flesh to be the savior of our world, and the salvation that we can have through him. He freed us from our sin. By placing our trust in him. He's here. This is our hope. It's the season of hope, right? That's what the holiday is. You can make that argument for this movie that it kind of encapsulates the quote-unquote heart of Christmas. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's kind of...
You could make that argument for a lot of movies.
Yeah, exactly. You could... That doesn't necessarily equate it to be a Christmas movie, and you really could make that argument for Die Hard as well.
Right.
And, good conquering evil, the Son of God, that is the deliverance from, that is the crushing blow to the enemy, the bad, the evil, Satan. So, I mean, I think, it gets really complicated when you start kind of talking about those things, and it's just universally been accepted over the last 80 some years that this is a Christmas movie. And I'm not arguing that it is or isn't. I'm just saying that, like...
The thought crossed my mind.
Right. Specifically because we covered Die Hard. That was in my mind just as I watched this movie. And especially when you look at, like, the first half of the movie is just all the story about George's life and all the stuff that's going on and how he fell in love with Mary and all, like, nothing at all that's relative to Christmas. It's his life. So... I think for those of you who are vehemently opposed to Die Hard being a Christmas movie, and I know some people who are like, no, it absolutely is not, while at the same time maintaining that It's a Wonderful Life absolutely is, maybe reflect, consider, weigh it out.
And I probably should have said this earlier, but as I was researching for our podcast today, I did come across a quote from the director, or I think it was the director, that said when he first came across this, because like you said earlier, like it's based on a story and things. Right. He did not view it as a Christmas, like that it was going to be a Christmas movie. Right. So
it was not intended to be that.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So again, that kind of... But again, we're not arguing that it is or isn't, but it is. It was just, I'm glad that you said that because I was thinking the same exact thing. Yeah,
it just so happens that's our mindset because of having covered Die Hard recently. So anyways, getting back on track here. Were there any scenes that really stuck out to you that you really, really liked, or anything that you did not like? Or
it's hard. I did, even though, like we said earlier, it did feel long, like not because it felt like it was
Not in a bad
dragged
way.
out, not in a bad way, but I did appreciate like them taking the time to go back and review everything that had happened so far in George Bailey's life, just so that way, I mean, it was that much more impactful when, you know, like we saw, oh, like your brother died when he was 8 because you weren't there to save
Right.
him. And, you know, all of these different things that it's like, he probably would have never even thought of, you know, happening.
Right.
So I did appreciate that they took that time to go through all of those scenarios in his life. And I also, I'm trying to think. Can you take a turn while I think of more scenes that I liked?
Yeah. So one thing I will say just off the top of my head that I did not like about this movie was the blatant biblical inaccuracy, just in regards to, like, you know, Clarence is an angel and all this stuff. Like, obviously, like, this is a story and it's fictional, and, you know, we don't have to dive super deep into it and whatever, but just the idea that, like, oh, angels earn their wings, like, you know, that doesn't happen. And when humans die, we don't become angels, which is inferred in this movie. You know, that's not a part of scripture. Angels and humans are created distinctly separate. And one of the unique things about us is that we're created in God's image and angels are not. So anyways, it's just, you know, for those of you who maybe have never realized those things, that this is really just kind of a Hollywood thing that's been put into stories that's not actually true. So that did bother me a little bit. You know, it's not like, oh man, I dislike this movie because it's in there, but it's just like, oh yeah, that's not accurate. But anyways, but I mean, overall, I think what I really did like is, I liked a lot of stuff about this movie. One thing that rings true for myself is just George's relationship with his brother Harry.
I appreciated that he was like genuinely happy for him all throughout it. When I mean, obviously there were undertones of, you know, like, oh, like he's off doing these amazing things and I'm stuck here when I wanted to do amazing things.
Right.
But I did appreciate that despite that, like he seemed genuinely happy for him
Right.
and all of his accomplishments. Sorry not to cut you off, but.
No, you're fine. But just, you know, I have 2 older brothers who I love very, very much and look up to. And just like, there's a little scene in there when Ruth is being introduced to George for the first time. She's like, oh, it's so nice to finally meet you. You know, Harry's always talking about George this and George that. And I guess that resonates with me a little bit, especially when I was younger. I just always talked about my brothers to other people, talked up about them just in the sense of like, you know, oh yeah, this is what my brother's doing. Or he just, I guess, bragging about them. And just, I relate to having that closeness and relationship. And I appreciate that. So anyways, I liked that was in there. I also really, really liked, the overall message of the film, which is just that you do matter, you know, your life matters. And, you know, we all have bad days sometimes, and sometimes we have horrible, awful days. Just the days that absolutely take your breath away, and, things that are completely devastating, and the temptation that can arise in those situations is exactly what George experienced, with that feeling of worthlessness, and that, you know, it's easier to just escape by calling it quits and getting out and being done with it, which is so sad. But the ultimate message being here that, you know, whether you realize it or not, whether you believe it or not, you have impacted other people's lives. You have made a difference in someone's life at some point, which has inevitably blossomed into something totally beautiful. So regardless of your religious beliefs or anything like that, which, I would highly encourage you to look to see what Scripture says, the Bible, see what the Bible has to say about you and the value of your life. Because there's really something truly special about what God has to say about you and how you were created and your worth and what your worth is based on. But if that's something that, you don't ascribe to, then just know that taking your life is never the answer. And I love seeing that play out here on screen, just that George is at such a low point, and he's there. He's ready to do it. And the ultimate, I guess, point is that, hey, literally somebody else would have died if you weren't alive, let alone all these other amazing things, and just that our lives do have value, and that we do matter, and that you matter.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, well said.
No, thank you. That was not prepared, just kind of coming from the heart, I guess. So, is there anything, were you able to think?
I was.
Oh, good.
Yes. So, a couple other scenes that I really liked were, I loved when Mary said to George, I can't remember the exact quote, but when she was asking him, like, do you remember when we were throwing rocks in the window and I wished for something, like, this is what I wished for, like when they, right. I really liked that scene. When they were like in the house, it was like her like dream came true, I guess, of marrying him and having the house and making it their own and things. I will say on that note, like, it kind of resonated with me, probably because we're in the middle of house projects right now as we're recording, but just like, I don't know, it just made my heart happy, seeing that play out, like that Mary was working hard on the house, giving it character, giving it love, making it their own and all that stuff. And obviously it's a little different because we built our home and they, I guess, kind of rebuilt their home because it was, dilapidated and all that stuff. But just the idea of like, oh, hey, I love seeing that because we're doing that too. We're pouring love, sweat equity into our home and all this stuff. And so. And then another one that I liked was when George Bailey he's gone around with Clarence when he wasn't born anymore, and he's like back. He realizes, oh, like, I have my life back, and he's just like running through the streets like shouting Merry Christmas, and like even like when he gets home and they're like saying that they're there to arrest him, or whatever. And he's still like just so joyful. Yeah, he's like, that's wonderful. Thank you. And but I also really liked when, everybody just started coming in and like giving money and that kind of thing. So I mean, that's the ultimate payoff of the film, right? Right. All these people that George sacrificed his life for came around him and showed up, delivered in his time of need. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think those are the main ones that I liked. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think there's a lot of things that we kind of could explore and touch on and keep going down rabbit holes, but I think I'm good. So I assume, are you good? Okay. Well, then without further ado, I think it is time that we introduce our guest that's in the studio. So today we have a new guest in the studio. He's somebody that has meant quite a lot to Emily and I both personally. He's impacted our life hugely. He was our youth group leader growing up. Also, he was one of Emily's neighbors. Yes. And he's just someone that has truly meant a lot to us. He's impacted us. He was one of the very first people to reach out to us and tell us that he was enjoying the show. So we're really excited to have Phil Conrad in the studio with us today. So Phil, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here on the Married to Movies podcast. I'm Phil Conrad. I don't know, been in Indiana, I guess now for 20-ish years, just right at 20 years. Married, have 3 kids, all adult children now, and the youngest one is a freshman in college at this point, and the oldest is he's out of school and is married now as well. And so yeah, doing well. I work in higher education, but I work in cybersecurity. So yeah, just a little bit different than movies, I guess, but
Pretty cool though.
but yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah. And Phil, you've had a podcast of your own in the past, correct?
I did. Several years ago, I ran it for about 3 years. I ran actually exactly 100 episodes. It was called
Nice.
an Intentional Parenting Podcast.
Yeah.
And that ran from 2015 to 2017, I think time frame was. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I enjoyed that quite a bit.
Yeah. That's super cool. Awesome. Well, I know that you are a pretty big fan of It's a Wonderful Life, right?
I'm a very big fan. Yeah, this movie's been pretty impactful, I think, over the years. This is the one that my wife and I would watch every Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Probably since we were married. And so I've probably seen this movie between 25 and 30 times at this point.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I ask you that as you're wearing It's a Wonderful Life t-shirt in the studio.
I did. I picked this T-shirt up we were in Seneca Falls,
Yeah.
New York, and so we took a trip out east, and we drove, and so part of the trip, this was my wife and I's 25th anniversary trip, and so we were passing through New York, and I intentionally made sure we had a stop prepared in Seneca Falls where they have the It's a Wonderful Life Museum.
Yeah.
And I believe every year they have like a festival surrounding It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes.
I believe on the second Saturday of December,
Okay.
which would make it today as we were
Oh,
recording.
that's awesome.
The second Saturday of December.
Yeah.
At the time of this recording. So, yeah, that's kind of funny how that lines up. But so yeah, we passed through there, and then there's one of the stores in that town. They had a bunch of T-shirts related to It's a Wonderful Life, and so we bought one for each of us in the family and the kids and stuff. And so that was a lot of fun. And they have just different things. They have like a bridge that's very similar to the one that Georgia Bailey, jumps off of to save Clarence, and just all kinds of like things related to It's a Wonderful Life there. So it was a lot of fun.
That's super cool. Well, I think we'll start out with how we introduce every guest onto the show is, how would you rate this movie on a scale of 1 to 100? And I will tell you that I rated it as a 91. And Em, how did you rate it?
I think an 88.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are our scores. How does yours stack up?
Mine is 100.
Wow.
Wow.
Yes,
Really?
this is my 100 movie.
Nice.
Yeah.
You are only our second guest on the show. And that's actually only the second time on the show we've had a 100 rating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other was for The Incredibles.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So as I was thinking about this I was thinking about this on my drive here,
Yeah.
and I thought to myself, I bet they are going to be between an 88 and a 92 on the
Really?
rating.
Wow. Wow. You know us well.
Part of it, yeah. But also, like, I don't know I would have rated this 100 the first time I saw it, after the first time I saw it either.
That's fair.
So-
yeah, because this is the very first time
Yeah.
we watched it.
Yes.
and so that was a lot of it. Like, it was a good movie, but like, part of it is like, it grows on you.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I feel like it means more as I've gotten older. It like has meant more to me, like different parts of the story.
You know, it's funny you say that. Our pastor, he actually spoke about It's a Wonderful Life in a sermon recently, and he said more or less the same thing, that it is probably his favorite Christmas movie, and that his appreciation for it grows every year. And it was honestly between him and my brother Josh, who watched it for the first time last year, and said, hey, it's probably my favorite Christmas movie now. Like, you guys should definitely check it out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So yeah, I would say it's I would say it's not my favorite Christmas movie. It's my favorite movie.
I was just about to ask that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because, and we'll get into all the reasons and stuff, but one of the reasons I think is like, this is the one that my wife and I quote all year long.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
like quotability is one of those things.
It definitely is.
Yeah. They've been talked about
Yeah.
with movies and stuff. And so like, yeah, across the board, I think this is the movie we for sure quote throughout the year the most.
Really? Yeah. Okay. So what are some of the quotes that you guys throw out?
Okay. Let's see. I think, well, one of them is kind of like, maybe we don't quote this one necessarily as much as we used to, but
Yeah.
when George is, I kind of have to find it here in my notes, but he comes home, he's all upset. He can't find the money.
Yes.
And he's kind of tearing through the house, and let's see, he's back at home. He's like, oh, another red letter day for the Baileys. Oh, he says, and he says this to his wife. He's like, you call this a happy family? Why do we have to have all these kids? And so it's some of those moments, like, comedically, my wife and I will just, say in jest, why do we have to have all these kids?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That is so
Just
funny.
when things are kind of stressful, just to kind of lighten the mood, or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's one of the big ones. And then when George and Clarence are in that little, I don't even know what to call it, boathouse or whatever, by the river.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just kind of getting to know each other, and Clarence says something to the effect of, well, we don't use money in heaven. And George says, it comes in pretty handy down here, bub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, some of the, my shirt says,
Yes.
I'm all right. The big quote from Uncle Billy is he's leaving the wedding party from
Yes.
Harry and his new bride, Ruth Dacre
Yes.
Bailey.
Yep.
And yeah, so he's drunk, and he's walking off. He crashes into the trash cans and says, I'm all right. I'm all right.
Yes.
Right. So we say that a lot. And then another big one is another between George and Clarence, and George says, oh, I don't know, either I'm off my nut or he is, or you are.
Right.
Clarence says, 'tisn't me. So that's another one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, there's a lot of fun ones from that movie that we threw out there and
Yeah.
That's
throughout
great.
the year. So yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Cool. Well, we do have some trivia for you, but before we get there, what are some of the scenes that stand out to you that you really like, or maybe dislike, or anything in between?
So more and more, there aren't any scenes I dislike. At the museum, I picked up a book called "It's a Wonderful Life: A Scene-by-Scene Guide to the Classic Film" by Michael Wildian.
Okay, that's cool.
And I read through this, partly in preparation for the podcast here.
Yes.
But I started reading it, and then I put it aside, and then we talked about doing this podcast. I'm like, oh, this is a perfect time to get this book back out.
Right. Yeah.
And so I read through it, and he also has a book along the lines for the movie Casablanca.
Oh, I would
Really?
love to check that
That's
out.
another movie that I know you guys have done.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So one that you might be interested in, and so going through this helped kind of connect some things.
Yeah.
Because it was really interesting to kind of learn more about the movie, and kind of even about some of the edits that are kind of thrown out. So I don't think I would say anymore that there's a scene I don't like.
Okay.
There's a lot of scenes I like. So, and I'll just kind of run through some of this list that I have. So, George is a boy with his friends, where it starts out, they're sledding down the hill, and he's, then him and his buddies are kind of walking through town, and just like those are fun scenes. Like, it's just like, there's just like a genuineness to it. And like, it's like it's just such a neat a neat film because it's like this era of like no tech, right? It's like nobody's like, sledding down a hill with their phone, like making a video for TikTok. Right. They're just enjoying life and each other.
Yeah.
And so that's, that's part of it. And then when George goes in to get he's shopping for a suitcase, right? And he's like, he's talking to the guy and he's like, the guy's showing George a suitcase. He's like, no, I want a big one.
Yeah.
And they freeze on that. They do a freeze frame on that shot of George, holding his hand out.
Yeah.
For like a couple seconds.
Yeah.
In the movie, and like I love that shot.
Yeah.
And I love that scene because he's just excited for his future and like the possibilities and what his future holds and like this trip he's about to go on. So I like that scene a lot. I love the scene with George and his dad. They're having a conversation between the two at the dinner table before.
Yes.
George goes off to the party. Again, that has like such a genuineness to it, and then his dad is just like a gentle spirited guy, and just warm and like just I don't know, it's just a neat scene between the two. Like he's trying to ask George if he'd be interested in coming back to the building alone, and and George just like, it's just, I don't know, Dad, it's just not, and so I don't but there's a lot I like about that scene with, even with Annie, well, Annie, why don't you draw up a chair? That way you'd be more comfortable.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What if I thought you guys, I don't know what she says. Guys, anything worth saying?
Right.
And, so that's that whole scene. And then of course the Charleston contest dancing scene where they're in the gym, and then the whole, deal with the gym floor opens up and that whole thing that's just a great scene.
Yeah, which we covered that. We talked about that earlier in the episode. Did you know that is like a real pool at a school that's still in use today? Beverly Hills High School?
I did, yes.
Okay.
That,
so crazy.
And the Martini Home, as I understand it, are the only two sites that remain from the movie.
Yeah.
Everything else was, a set and has been since torn down and whatnot. But
yeah.
So which would be kind of fun to visit that high school. Right?
Yeah, it'd be super cool.
See that. Yeah. And then George and Mary, they're walking along the street singing Buffalo Gals. Yeah. And they're walking down the street together. The whole Lasso of the Moon quote scene is really, really cool. Because it's like, I don't know, who would like think of that? Like that's just kind of sweet and neat, kind of a fun scene. Oh, and then like, he like steps on a robe and she like hides in the bushes, and this whole part. Yeah. So this is like another quote that my wife and I will say, like, well, this is a very interesting situation. It's not every day a man gets in a situation like this. Right. Not in Bedford Falls anyway.
Right. Yeah.
That whole thing's hilarious. And she's like, oh, I'll call the police. Yeah. Oh, they're way downtown. They'd be on my side anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that whole thing. And of course we talked about at the party for Harry and Ruth, Uncle Billy. Right. The whole, I'm all right.
Yeah.
I'm all right. Scene. Bert and Ernie serenading George and Mary on their honeymoon.
Yes.
And the I Love You Truly song they sing outside the window. And then one of these days, this bright young man is going to be asking George Bailey for a job. So that was the accountant that was talking to Mr. Potter and showing him all the development.
Yes. Yep.
And he's in his office, and before he walks out, he's like, and this is another quote. One of these days, this bright young man is going to be asking George Bailey for a job. Well, in February of 2020, this bright young man did ask George Bailey for a job. So there was a job opening at this organization I work for, and the hiring manager's name was George Bailey.
Really?
Legit.
That is hilarious.
And so I asked him for a job, and so I applied for a position. Yeah. That was February 2020. And of course, in March 2020 came the pandemic. Yep. And along with the pandemic came a hiring freeze. And so I had to wait a year and a half. Again, asked George Bailey for a job. Yeah. And I got it at that time. So I actually worked for George Bailey.
That's awesome.
That is
at this point.
That is so funny.
Yeah. So that's that's kind of a fun detail, and it's just kind of a fun thing, like to.
Well, especially for somebody who's a big fan of the movie.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Like, this is like my dream.
Yeah.
Right. That'd be like if my boss's name was like Tony Stark. You know?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you just find the Tony Starks. You see what company and what jobs he's hiring for, and there you go. Yeah, the whole scene we kind of discussed. He's back at home with the family. The family's decorating the tree with all the kids around. Doing different things. Janie's playing the piano. That whole scene, yeah. So I think part of that too is like the stress that he feels in that moment is kind of relatable in that scene. You know, the whole idea of bringing your work home with you, like,
Yeah.
just like, you know, he's has this work issue that he's trying to resolve and can't resolve, and he just can't fix it.
Right.
And it's just like weighing on him, and so just like. You know, because I've had those times where like you come home and you're just like not in a good place.
Yes.
To like
Yep.
deal with your family and your kids, and it can be challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The scene where with Clarence and then George jumps in to save him, that whole thing, and Clarence is going on about how he's, you know, whatever, 293 next May is how
Right,
old he's gonna,
yeah.
right? And so and then like the one guy like kind of looks at him and like gets up to leave.
Yeah.
And Clarence is like, "Cheerio, my good man."
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That whole thing, just like the way
Yeah.
Clarence is, like his whole, I don't know, his whole disposition, and then just some of the phrases and language he uses is just hilarious.
Yeah.
The way he talks, like, you know, throughout the film is great.
Yeah. I will say, in that scene specifically, one thing that stood out to me that I did like was when George was saying, he was kind of complaining like, "Oh, this wouldn't have happened if I didn't save you," or something or other. And Clarence chimes in and he's like, "Well, I saved you." And it's like, you know, what's like where the story is going and what's going to happen. But I love that interchange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because then Clarence goes on to say, "Well, I'm your guardian angel," and then
Right.
and then George is like, "Well, you look about the kind of angel I'd get." Yeah. There's like, I feel like there's so many like kind of one-liners throughout here. This movie that's just great. And then like, so they're in Pottersville. They go back to what they think is Martini's, but it's now called Nick's.
Yes.
Right in the bar, and then they get ready to get tossed out, and this is kind of one of those quotes that where Nick says, "Out you two pixies go, through the door, out the window."
Yeah.
Like that. And then and then the scene where he goes back to his mom's house, and his mom doesn't recognize him, of course.
Oh yeah.
So he like runs back out to the street, and he looks from like I guess left to right, and the camera does an extreme close up right there on his face.
Yes.
And like just that whole like he like looks right into the camera and then like, you know, pans across, and
Yeah.
I really like that scene. And then at the end where, you know, he runs back to the bridge, and this is when Bert's been kind of chasing him through town, and he's just praying and wanting like life to get back to normal or the way it was, and you know, regardless of the consequences, and then Bert comes back to him, and he's everything's back to normal. He's like, my mouth's bleeding, Bert. My mouth's bleeding.
Yeah.
And then he's like running through Bedford Falls and Merry Christmas, Bedford Falls. You know, all this stuff. And then of course the classic closing scene at the very end of the movie, and they're all the, you know, all the people are bringing money for him, and everybody's coming in, and Harry gets home, and then they close with a song, Old Lang Syne, and just that classic part. So I guess those are that's pretty much the whole movie, I guess, sort of, but spoiler alert, but I mean, so like the whole movie is my favorite scene, I guess. I don't know, it's, you know, it's hard to know exactly where to stop and that, but
No, I think that speaks to the fact that this movie really does mean a lot to you. That you truly are a fan, and I mean that's kind of what I would anticipate from somebody who gave it a 100 score.
Yeah.
You know? Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we're going to dive into some trivia now.
Okay.
So we have 4 or 5. We have 5 questions for you. Em, do you want to start us off?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so first one, can you name all of George's children?
I thought you might ask that question.
Really? All right.
Pete,
Yes.
Janie,
Yep.
Tommy,
Yep.
and Zuzu.
Great job.
Nice. Nailed it.
Did you know we at one point had a cat named Zuzu?
I did know that.
I did
Yes.
not.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've met
That's
her
great.
before.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we had to put her down back in May this year. So 18 years we had that cat.
18 years. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, we got a new cat. We named our new one Fezzy
Yeah?
after the character Fezziwig from A Christmas Carol.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome.
So A Christmas Carol is my wife's favorite movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's cool.
So yeah.
It's funny because, I mean, like we said, we had never seen this movie before
Yeah.
last week. And
Right.
when I watched it and I heard the name Zuzu, I thought of your cat. And I was like, oh.
Yep. That's where the name came from.
That is so funny. Oh, man. Okay. Next question. Which ear did George lose hearing in?
Ooh, which year? That would have been during the thing. I think it was 19.
Oh, sorry. Ear.
If you want to say
Oh,
the year
which
too,
ear?
though, go
Yeah,
for
I
it.
would be incredibly impressed if you knew the year.
Yeah, I think it was 1919 when they held the whole sledding deal.
Yeah.
His
I think
left
so.
ear though.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Great.
Nailed
Bonus
it.
points.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you had the year and the year.
That's funny. Yeah, you're right. Which year? Which year? Which year?
No, but I think they timeline that out, don't
Yeah.
they? in
They
the
do,
movie?
they
exactly.
do.
Yeah.
I thought
Yep.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that would have been a better question.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next one. When Clarence was alive, what did he do for a living?
Oh. When Clarence was alive, what did he do for a living? I don't remember that one.
That's okay.
What was it?
A clockmaker.
Clockmaker. Okay.
Yes. Yep. All right, next question. What did George always wish for when he first came into the drugstore?
I wish I had $1 million.
Yes.
Hot dog.
That one's a gimme.
They had one of those little devices at that museum.
Oh,
It
really?
wasn't the one from the movie, but they had a replica
Yeah.
of those little lighter things.
Is that what it's supposed to
I think
be?
it was like a
It's a
cigar
lighter.
lighter, yeah, some
Oh,
kind
that
of
makes sense, I
yeah.
guess. Yeah. Okay. I was trying to kind of figure that out, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. What is Mr. Potter's first name?
Henry.
Yes.
Henry F.
Great
Potter,
job.
I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yep. Very nice. Well, that's the trivia we had prepped for you.
Okay.
So beyond this, it's kind of wide open. Anything you want to talk about, shoot for
Okay.
it. Go for it.
Well, I'll move into like some personal reasons why this movie is special.
Yes.
So I mentioned the scene where George comes home stressed after losing the $8,000.
Yeah.
And just being able to relate to that.
Yeah.
So, having grown children now and kind of raised a family, there are those times where you just like, feel that stress because
Yeah.
life's just not always, roses and easy.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that was something I could resonate with.
Yeah.
This movie reminds me of home. So,
Okay.
small town,
Yeah.
USA. My grandpa ran a small community bank.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. My grandpa was born in 1909.
Yeah.
I think George Bailey would have been born around 1908 or 07
Yeah. Yep.
ish. So it just kind of gives me thoughts of like, well, I mean, maybe this was sort of what my grandpa's experience could have been like.
Sure.
Working at a bank in 1946 or 1938,
Right.
through that time period. So that was just kind of neat. Just thinking about them being the same age. So that was kind of fun. I love Jimmy Stewart. I think he's just a phenomenal actor.
Yeah.
Of course, I've seen other movies that he's been in. Rear Window and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance comes to mind.
Okay. Yeah.
Liberty Van, I can't remember the title. So yeah, there's some other movies he's been in that I don't know, being able to just like, he's very imitatable. Like
Yeah.
you hear like Jimmy Fallon does a quick impression in the movie Fever Pitch. You
Yeah.
ever seen that movie?
I have not.
He's like him and Drew Barrymore.
Okay.
Are walking in the park and he's like, "Oh, hey, Clarence!" You know, he's just kind of like throwing out some names and
Yeah.
trying to, you know, from the It's Wonderful Life movie, I think. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I've seen Dana Carvey do a good impression of Jimmy Stewart on Saturday Night Live or somewhere.
Yeah. I'm sure he can
like,
do everybody.
Yeah, he can, yeah. So he's pretty funny. And then but It's Wonderful Life is like it's a movie you see characters watching in other movies. Like I think it comes up in
Yeah.
Lampoon's Christmas Vacation,
It does.
Home Alone, maybe.
Yeah. Batman the Animated Series in the 90s had a full episode dedicated to It's a Wonderful
No
Life.
kidding.
Which that was one of my favorite cartoons growing up. I have the entire series on DVD. But yeah, they kind of play out George Bailey's life through Bruce Wayne. Like, you know, I wish I wasn't Batman just because of the toll it's taking on his life type thing. So anyways, yeah.
That's interesting. And then, like I mentioned, my wife and I visited Seneca Falls back in the fall of 22. And then someday I want to get to the Jimmy Stewart Museum, which is
That's
located in his birthplace. Do you know where that is?
I do not.
Indiana, Pennsylvania.
Oh, I did
Really?
see that now
Isn't that
that you bring it
interesting?
up. Yeah.
That,
That's
yeah,
so
that
cool.
is very interesting.
Another tie-in to
Yeah.
because we're in Indiana.
Yeah. Where's Hoosiers over here?
Yeah. Like I said, this is my favorite movie, the one we watch every Christmas Eve as a family. So as you guys over the Smith household are watching Home Alone,
Yes.
we're back in the Conrad household watching It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes. Yeah.
Admittedly, sometimes we fall asleep to it because it's
Right.
Sometimes you can't get to it till it's late. You know, we
Yeah.
had
Oh my gosh.
our Christmas Eve service, you know, at church, and
Right.
then,
Yeah.
and we usually would watch that after we put the kids to bed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it'd be kind of late sometimes. And so, but yeah, and then eventually the kids were brought in to watch it with us. Yeah, I mentioned it being a real quotable movie. And then, being seen in other movies and stuff. But, probably I think the biggest thing personally is just the whole tie-in with the banking, aspect of it. And my grandpa being, my dad was then, president of that bank.
Okay.
As my grandpa left and moved on and stuff. And so just growing up with that,
Yeah.
being able to identify with a small, community bank was very,
Right.
so that kind of makes it, pretty personal that way. And it's just a lot of tie-ins with that.
Yeah.
So through, with that, I have a few, more than a few fun facts as well.
Okay.
That's awesome. Yeah, we love it.
I don't know, again, maybe some of these you've covered, but
Okay.
the creative seed, and a lot of these were from this book, Scene by Scene Guide to the Classic Film by Michael William.
Yeah.
So
That is so cool. I'm definitely going to check out the Casablanca one just because
Yeah.
it's not a novelization of the film. It's like breaking down the actual
Yes.
Yeah,
movie.
that's really cool.
Yeah, that's
so part of preparing, I read this book, and then I would watch the scene after I had read that chapter or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And so
that's
then
awesome.
I broke it up that way.
Yeah.
And it just because he points out so much stuff
Yeah.
within each scene, and kind of helps, I don't know, make more sense of some of the things that maybe didn't make
Yeah.
sense. So that was pretty interesting. But he says the creative seed for Wonderful Life was a short story called The Greatest Gift by Philip Van Doren Stern.
Yeah.
First printed in 1943. And then he said, I've read it, was loosely inspired by A Christmas Carol, though I'm not certain that was 100% accurate.
Okay.
So that's kind of a neat tie-in, again, because I mentioned my wife's favorite film,
Right.
A Christmas Carol, being sort of inspiration for this book, which is inspiration for this movie.
Right. Which, by the way, listeners, Phil, being the sweet guy that he is, brought us a copy of that book as a gift. So we're gonna dive into that.
Yeah.
Jimmy Stewart was born May 20th, 1908, again, Indiana, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
So it was 1908 he was born. Donna Reed was born January 27, 1921, on a farm outside of Denison, Iowa.
So there
both
was a
of them-
decent age gap between them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But both, kind of being from the Midwest, kind of
Yeah.
smaller towns. I think Jimmy Stewart's dad ran a hardware store,
Okay.
which is I think where his museum is at in the building that was previously that hardware store.
Oh, that's cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And that is interesting that they both grew up in a small town. I mean, if they're good actors, then you're going to believe it no matter what on the movie, but it seemed very sincere.
Yeah.
Just like it, I don't know, the way they acted seemed very relatable.
Yeah, yeah. And Ma Bailey, who was played by Beulah Bond, also played Jimmy Stewart's mother in 3 other films.
Yes.
Including Mr. Smith Goes to Washington,
Oh, really?
which is another one that
Yeah.
I'd seen.
Okay. Yeah.
So another tie-in here with Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Lionel Barrymore, who played Mr. Potter, this is kind of neat, is the great uncle of Drew Barrymore.
I looked that up.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah, so when we were recording the first half of this episode and Emily was going through the cast list, I was like, Hollywood, a lot of the time is kind of a family business, Barrymore. So I looked it up as you were going through the cast list and then I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never really known that, but yeah, so his brother, John, is Drew Barrymore's grandfather.
That's cool.
And then Lionel Barrymore was also known for his radio performances as Scrooge in A Christmas Carol.
Oh, that's
Oh,
cool.
yeah,
was
that is
interesting.
cool.
So again, in the scene with Billy, he's drunk, he's walking off, he's crashes in the trash cans. Legend has it that this off-screen sound of Uncle Billy crashing into what sounded like garbage cans was unscripted.
Yes, we actually talked about that earlier, that
Yeah,
it was
okay.
a sound technician
Yes,
that fell or
yes.
knocked something over.
As the story goes, a stagehand inadvertently knocked over some props at the end of the shot, prompting Thomas Mitchell to ad-lib, "I'm all right, I'm all right."
Yeah. Which is like, credit to him. That's great.
That is. But it goes on. He says, well, the script as it stood just prior to filming already called for Uncle Billy to crash into garbage cans. Now, an earlier version did not include the all right line, so who knows, maybe a mishap did occur, inspiring Thomas Mitchell to improvise that line. But whatever the case, any unscripted clanking likely would have resulted in the scene being reshot with proper sound effects. So
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that is interesting. I also saw, which I don't know if this validates it or not, but I saw that the director, Frank Capra,
Frank Capra.
yeah, he was so appreciative of the fact that happened and that it prompted him to ad-lib, I'm all right, that he gave the sound technician $10 for doing that, which is the equivalent of like almost $160 today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, So I thought that was really interesting. And then the song Buffalo Gals. This is really interesting. I learned reading this book. Buffalo Gals is an old minstrel song composed in 1844 about Buffalo, New York prostitutes being courted by gents in the rough and tumble days that came with the completion of the Erie Canal.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Never would have guessed that.
So, yeah, that came as a little bit of a shocker.
Yeah.
Jimmy the Raven was that bird in the
Yeah.
in the bank. So Capra was a fan of Jimmy. So Jimmy was also in his film You Can't Take It With You, which also featured Jimmy Stewart.
Okay. Yeah.
This was interesting. The Raven was also in The Wizard of Oz, sharing a scene with Dorothy and the Scarecrow.
Oh, interesting.
crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
This guy is a full-blown star.
I thought I recognized that bird somewhere. Yeah. So yeah, full blown. I guess I don't know.
I wonder if his
Animal training's a big thing in Hollywood. 'Cause
it
you gotta,
is. Yeah. I wonder if his keeper or owner,
Yeah.
if they were making big bucks for him.
I don't know. You'd think so. 320 Sycamore above the fireplace is a framed piece of needlework that reads, "The Lord will provide." This is kind of so. Whenever Heather and I are going through some challenging, Heather's my wife.
Yes.
we're going through some challenging thing. We always would say, "God will take care of us,"
Yeah.
and so it was kind of neat to have that to see that that being there.
Yeah,
in their
that
house.
is that's super cool. I didn't even notice that while watching the film.
Yeah, there's a lot of things like, like again, through reading the book, like, and after you watch it, 10, 12, 15 times, you start to like
Right.
look at stuff in the background and stuff like, around like the main, things that are going on in the scene. So
Yeah.
you just start to pick up more things and learn more. But, and then like Sam Wainwright's car. So this is the car that he pulls up in as, George and Mary are dedicating the Martini home.
Yes.
With the bread and the salt and the wine, and so his buddy pulls up, hee haw Sam, and he pulls up in this car. It's a Duesenberg town car.
Okay.
Apparently was one of the finest of its time. Duesenberg Motors opened in Indianapolis in 1920.
What?
Yeah, it was
Man.
the first American-made race car to win the International Grand Prix at Le Mans.
No way.
It won the Indy 500 in 1924, 1925, and 1927.
That is awesome.
awesome.
So I've really in the last year really gotten into automotive history and manufacturers and racing and lots of stuff. So that's very cool.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's in our territory.
In our territory is like
Yeah.
kind of extra special that way.
Yeah.
Let's see, next one. Frank Capra received 5 nominations each for Best Picture and Best Director. He won 3 times for Best Director and 1 time for Best Picture.
Nice.
So that was
Nice.
kind of interesting.
Do you know, did he get anything for It's a Wonderful Life?
I believe he did not.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think it wasn't really as well received as maybe it is today. Like,
Yeah.
even like, and I think part of that was, I think in 1974, it like there was I don't know, no more copyrights on it, and so it was like public domain.
Oh, yeah.
And so, TV stations or whatever could just kind of show it.
Yeah.
Um,
That makes a lot of sense because we covered that kind of in the first part, just that it wasn't received super well and that the box office return was actually less than
their
the budget. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah. The director Frank Capra sources a Sherman M4 tank for a scene in the war montage.
That's awesome.
This was the U.S.'s go-to tank during World War II.
Yeah.
It's only in there for like 2 seconds, and you can hardly see. I mean, you probably don't even like remember or recognize it, but like it's during that war montage, and like I think Mr. Gower is standing on like trying to sell war bonds or something, but he's like
Yes.
standing on top of it, and like there's I think a U.S. flag in the backdrop, and
Yes, I do. I
Kinda draped
vaguely
across
remember
it.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but so I think he just went to some some extra steps to try to get that tank.
Yeah.
And it ended up being in the movie for like a couple seconds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple definitions. Do you guys know what VE Day and VJ Day stand for?
Yes. Well, actually, our pastor just talked about this in
Did
a
he?
sermon the other day. Yeah. So VE Day is Victory in Europe Day, correct?
Right. Victory over Europe. Yeah.
Or Victory over Europe. I don't rember what VJ Day is though.
So VJ is Victory over Japan.
Okay. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Which first several times I've saw that movie. I need to look up what that means. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
So, but yeah, because they mentioned that a few times. Jimmy Stewart actually served as a combat pilot in World War II.
Really?
Yeah. So,
That's actually, we did talk about that, didn't we?
I didn't know he was a pilot, but I didn't know he was in the war.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of an interesting reading. Like, I think a lot of stuff, like movies, just like shut down for a period of
Yeah.
time during the war. And so, It's a Wonderful Life, as I think Frank Capra's first movie after the war.
Okay. Yeah.
Was part of that too. Two Navy pilots received the Medal of Honor during World War II, like Harry Bailey.
Yep.
They were David McCampbell and Butch O'Hare, for whom O'Hare International Airport is named.
Oh.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
That's crazy.
I've flown out of O'Hare a lot, and so yeah, I thought that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Filming in California was warm in the summer. You maybe touched on this and that in your first half, but because I think it was like, I don't know, March to July or April
Yes.
to July.
Something
Yep.
like that, yeah.
Yep.
Or mid, yeah. So Christmas Eve scenes were filmed in mid-June, saw temperatures topping out at 86 degrees. So that's the thing about some of these Christmas movies. They're all like filmed like during like some of the warmest weather months. So that'd be kind of challenging to have to like pretend it's cold.
Spirit.
Yeah.
Right.
Summer.
Yeah. And be like all, have your coat on, all that stuff, which I think Emily, you had said that you could see in the background, like actors sweating and stuff like that.
Yeah. And like the close-ups of George's face, like you can see sweat on his forehead.
Right.
And,
Yeah. So that's pretty neat. George at Martini's bar. There's 2 Italian songs that play, and one is the soprano voice of Adriana Castellati.
Okay.
She is also the voice of Disney's Snow White in the 1937 film.
Oh, wow.
cool.
That is super cool. Yeah.
So just kind of another, I don't know.
Man,
kind of
Phil
familiar.
bringing us the good stuff on the podcast today.
Yeah. Well, you start digging into a movie and you just find out all sorts of neat stuff.
Yeah.
Of all the scenes that Jimmy nailed, this one in Martini's stood out the most to him. He was so emptied his first take, he didn't want to do anymore. And I think that's maybe the one he actually was like started crying in. And
Okay.
I think part of that was even from like the motion of having come through the war and stuff, World War II, just at that point. So there's just that was that's a really good scene and like interesting fact about that. And so I think kind of touch on this, but this movie ties into a lot of other movies. Mr. Martini, played by William Edmonds, ties into Casablanca. And it says, for all of 8 seconds in Rick's Cafe, he gives instructions to a man seeking illegal passage out of Casablanca.
Oh, yeah. I know what scene you're talking about. I can't, I would never have guessed that it was the same actor, but that's cool.
Yeah. And I haven't seen Casablanca for a number of years. So I couldn't picture it. But again, I know you guys did that movie. And then the guy, Nick, played by Sheldon Leonard, went on to become a TV producer, producing for the Andy Griffith Show, the Dick Van Dyke Show, among others.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
So Andy Griffith.
Yeah.
And then the scene where Bert is he's shooting at so George just takes off and he starts to shoot at him.
Yes.
And then there's a sign in the background that says Pottersville. It's all lit up. As he's shooting, the letters S, V, and I go black. And so it kind of looks like he shoots out the letters. But Capra noted that was just a mere coincidence. Those letters just
flickered.
Yeah, just flicked off for some reason. So he didn't
That worked
really
out
shoot
well.
him out. They didn't really shoot him out, but so that was just kind of fun.
Yeah.
And then back to Zuzu. Zuzu was the name of a popular ginger snap cookie sold by Nabisco starting in around 1901. So when George says, Zuzu, my little ginger snap, would have been a call to the audience.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That was one thing that when I watched it and he said that his daughter's name was Zuzu, I was like, man, that seems kind of uncommon for that period.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily a super common name today either, but I guess I just wouldn't have expected it. But that makes sense.
Yeah. And then I think I'd read somewhere in there too that the boy that played Pete was a pretty famous actor from another show that he had been doing. So the audience would have recognized him at that show as well. So some different experiences. And again, there's a ton more I could have pulled out, but I gotta stop somewhere. So we can't go all day.
Right. No.
But,
well, everything that you brought to us today was like really, really awesome. And I mean, there's some stuff that we covered, but the majority of that we did not.
Yeah.
So that was,
good.
I mean, you added a lot of really good content.
Yeah,
exactly. Keeping it fresh. Awesome. Well, I think we don't have anything else that we necessarily are wanting to cover. And is there anything else that you want to touch on?
There probably is, but I think I've covered all I have prepared today. So
okay, no worries. Thanks. Awesome. Well, Phil, thank you so much for coming on the show with us today. It really is, I mean, just as we've been recording for the last half hour or however long it's been, 40 minutes. Really has been a blessing to me. It's been a joy to have you here in the studio. It's been a while since we've seen you. So just being together again is great. But also we just really, really appreciate you. So thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.
Yes, of course. And now you can one up your son, who was one of the people who won a t-shirt from us.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
now you can tell him, well, hey, I've been on the show.
On the show.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Phil.
Thank you.
So that wraps up this week's episode. Thank you guys for listening. We really enjoyed having Phil on the podcast this week. It was a lot of fun. Great to see an old friend / mentor. And I think that was actually our longest episode ever, which is really cool because he knew so much about it, and it was just a really great time.
Yeah. And now we are officially at the halfway point of season 2.
Wow, are we really?
We really are.
That's crazy.
So we're at the halfway point of the season, and we're headed into our last week of the 4 weeks of Christmas movies.
Yes.
Next week, we are going to be covering one of the all-time great Christmas movies, Elf.
One of my faves.
I think it's one of everybody's faves. I don't know that I've ever met anybody who is like, yeah, I don't really like that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really excited about covering it. If you want to watch it ahead of time, it is streaming on Hulu, HBO Max, and Amazon Prime. Also, Philo. I don't know if anybody uses that. I've never heard of it, but it is streaming on there. So with that, thank you guys for listening. If you liked what you heard, give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating on Spotify, and we hope you have a great week.
See you next week.
Bye.